John has come to Portsmouth to meet naval historian Andrew Lambert on board HMS Warrior. He hopes to find out more about Thomas's life as a stoker in the Victorian Navy.
Andrew.
John.
Hi.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Lovely ship.
Yeah, it's magnificent.
I wanted to meet you because I've been looking into my great-great-granddad, Thomas Beaton. I've got some of his service record. The thing that stood out to me where he's got a court-martial and then spent a period of time in prison, so I wanted to try and understand what had gone on there. Right. And also, really, what his life would have been like on a ship, because he's listed down as being a stoker. I mean, my impression, in all honesty, is that he's joined the Navy because he didn't have much else to do in terms of options. Is that a fair assessment, or was joining the Navy a good option for somebody?
This is going to be a really aspirational thing to do. First of all, it's going to teach him to be a sailor. Then it teaches him to be a stoker, which is a skilled and very demanding job. To be a working class man in mid-19th century, to be a skilled man in the Royal Navy is about as high as you're going to get. This ship, it really sums the whole thing up. This is a ship that he would have seen during his service career. We can go below and have a look at where they live.
Oh, brilliant, yeah. Thank you.
So we're going down now into the stokehole, and when Thomas comes on duty, he's coming down this way, he'd found that the heat would be rising up from the engines. We've got a huge amount of coal being burnt.
Why would you pick to do this then? Because this seems like the most grimmest job on the ship.
Extra money, shorter shifts. It's got potential.
Oh.
And here we are. This is the stokehole.
Wow.
The sheer scale of it, you know, we've got 10 boilers, 6 in this boiler room, 4 in the back boiler room, each of them with 2 fronts, and they're using so much coal they need these mechanical hoists to get the coal out of the bunkers fast enough for the stokers to ram it into the stokehold.
Working the ship's engines was intensive and back-breaking work, shoveling coal in stifling heat for hours at a time, and with the risk of serious burns. There was no ventilation in the stokeholes, and the temperature of the furnaces could soar to 100 degrees, causing men to pass out. But coal-fired steam propulsion gave the Royal Navy's warships a military advantage. No longer dependent on prevailing winds, they could now take direct routes with increased speed and maneuverability. Stokers like Thomas were at the heart of this new technology.
So how many men would work in a space like this?
40 men stoking.
And stoking's basically shoveling coal in?
It's a combination of getting the coal in there and then making sure it burns efficiently. So you've got this huge grate area here, and the air is coming in the bottom, it's going through the coal, and the hot air is then heating the water up here. So this is your boiler. This is very hot. You don't want to be touching this when the boiler's running. It's about 120 degrees Fahrenheit down here when everything is running at full speed.
So I'm going to do what my great-great-granddad did?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just doing that?
Yeah.
How long would you be down here doing this?
Shift 4 hours.
It's a hell of a workhouse, isn't it? So for Thomas, and making that decision to be a stoker and to join the Navy has been a positive step up.
Yeah, absolutely. He's joined the most important military organisation in the world, and he's made a choice to move from being a sailor, old technology, to being a stoker, new technology. So he's going with the flow.
But then I've still got this blip on his career where he's had this court-martial and put in prison. Have you got any explanation for that?
I think there's a good place we can look, and we might be able to get to the bottom of that because the Navy's pretty good at keeping records. So we'd better head for the library.
Oh, okay. Shall I turn the fire off?
So this is the Crimea at the time of the Crimean War. And while it's called the Crimean War, it only actually happened down here, this little bit around the naval base at Sevastopol.
In 1854, the Crimean War began when Britain and France declared war on Russia in an attempt to hold back Russian expansion. Thomas Beaton was serving at the time on HMS Tiger, one of the ships sent as part of the mission to capture Russian ports in the Black Sea. But things did not go according to plan.
The Tiger, with 2 other ships, have been sent from the fleet to put a blockade on Odessa. Now, I think things start to go badly wrong when they get here.
And why?
Why? The ship was lost. So our man is in a major naval disaster. He's in a shipwreck. They run aground in a thick fog. They were under a high cliff, so they're in a very bad position. They could be fired down on, and they desperately needed to get off that beach as soon as possible. But the problem is the Russians are going to be along pretty soon, and critically, this is the account of Alfred Royer. He was the senior surviving officer of the ship. And you can see here.
A small boat with 2 oars pulled across our bows, close alongshore towards the city, evidently intent upon giving notice of the catastrophe, while just above, on the cliff, through the slowly disappearing fog, we could discover the well-known figure of a Cossack on horseback. What an image! With long lance in hand, galloping off to announce the news to his superiors of the grounding of a steamer on the coast. To increase, if possible, the interest of the scene, we could discern 2 ladies with pink parasols promenading in their garden, which reached the edge of the cliff. What an image! I mean, that just gives you such a sense of what was going on. This idea of a Cossack with a lance in hand who just happened to be riding around, and there's ladies with pink parasols, whilst downstairs, Thomas would have been working his socks off along with everybody else under the constant threat that they'd have been targeted.
Yep. And then we've got the contemporary Illustrated London News woodcut of the scene. Here's the Tiger, hard aground under the cliff. This is probably the house of the garden of the ladies with the famous pink parasols. The Russians brought up an artillery battery onto the cliffs. They opened fire, and before the sailors on the ship could get the ship off the ground and away, the ship was badly damaged. The captain was mortally wounded. Several other men were killed, and they had to lower their colours and surrender.
Why would being in a shipwreck mean that you get a court-martial?
Because in the Navy, if you lose your ship, you have to account for it. A court-martial is a standard procedure at which the survivors of any shipwreck have to account for the loss of their ship.